Hello and welcome. I'm going to read you a story, and it's a part of our clothing study. We've been talking about things you wear outside in the weather. We've been exploring the different features of our clothes, how they stay together, colors, and designs. And I'm going to wear what you call a prop or a costume while I read this story to you. So I'm going to put it on. It is a piece of clothing that is very much a big part of the story. So if I put this on, I'm wondering if it's going to be a big clue as to what the story is here. Can you see what my clothing is? Have you heard a story in which the character is wearing a red hooded cape? What do you think this story is going to be called? And if I were to pick up my basket of goodies, now do you know the story I'm going to tell? Did you guess Little Red Riding Hood? Well, that is the story. So the title is Little Red Riding Hood, and it was retold by Bonnie Dawkins because it's a very old story that's been around for a very long time. And it is a little bit different than the version that I grew up with, and maybe you too, if you're the grown-up listening with your child. But the very most important part is that it's about a piece of clothing that's very characteristic of her, and red happens to be my favorite color also, so we have some things in common. Let's begin. Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, a little girl lived with her mother and her brother in a small cottage by the edge of the forest. Her favorite piece of clothing was a long red cape with a silky soft hood, and she wore it so often that people began to call her Little Red Riding Hood. One day, Little Red Riding Hood was bored and looking for something to do. When you're bored, that just means you don't really know what to do next, and if you aren't able to figure something out, someone might give you an idea. Her mother says you could sweep the floor, as she was busy painting the fence. Her brother said, you could help me clean the yard, as he was busy. What is he doing? Is he working? Yeah, he's chopping some wood. They live a long time ago, I think. No, said Little Red Riding Hood. I don't think that's what I want to do. Oh, yeah, look at that face. That's definitely a I'm not sure what to do face. Mom said, hey, then you could visit your grandmother. You're old enough to go by yourself, and you haven't seen her for weeks. That's exactly what I want to do, said Little Red Riding Hood. Grandmother lives on the other side of the forest, and I haven't seen her for so long. It will be such a great adventure. So Little Red Riding Hood's mother packed her a basket full of goodies and treats to take to grandmother. And she said, this is the important part, these are the safety rules. The woods can be dangerous, so when you leave, please go straight to grandma's. Don't be late. Oh, I think I heard some words that sound the same. Let's say that again. When you leave, please go straight to grandma's. Don't be late. She won't listen, said her brother. Yes, I will, said Little Red Riding Hood. Of course she will, said her mother. Oh, and dear, something else before you go. Only talk to those you know. So she's telling her not to talk to strangers, and that is a very important rule. She won't listen, said her brother. Yes, I will, said Little Red Riding Hood. Of course she will, said her mother. Oh, and one last thing, sweetheart. From the path you shouldn't stray, or you could get lost someday. From the path you shouldn't stray, or you could get lost someday. So she's telling her to go straight to grandmother's house. Don't talk to strangers and stay on the path because those are important safety ideas. She won't listen, said her brother. Yes, I will, said Little Red Riding Hood. What did Mother say? Of course she will. Goodbye, dear. Give your grandmother a hug for me. Yes, Mother, said Little Red Riding Hood, and then she headed out the door and down the path with her basket. Do-do-do-do-do. She looks like she's having fun already. There was so much to see in this woods. A sleeping owl, a giant mushroom, an amazing spider web. Oh, those are all interesting things to see. Little Red Riding Hood remembered what her mother had said. When you leave, please go straight to Grandma's. Don't be late. But, thought Little Red Riding Hood, Mother surely wouldn't want me not to enjoy this forest. So she stopped and looked around. Just then, a dark shape stepped out from behind one of the trees. It was a wolf, and he was smiling a charming smile. Why, hello, little girl, said the wolf. Isn't it a lovely day? Little Red Riding Hood remembered what her mother had said. Something else before you go. Only talk to those you know. Does she know this wolf? No, she doesn't. But, thought Little Red Riding Hood, he seems like such a friendly wolf. Mother surely wouldn't want me to be rude. Well, I understand her thinking, but remember, when your parents tell you to be careful and to follow some guidelines, you probably should listen. Hello, Mr. Wolf, said Little Red Riding Hood. Yes, it's a lovely day, isn't it? And you seem to be such a delightful child. The wolf's smile grew even bigger. What might your name be? He asked. Well, everyone calls me Little Red Riding Hood. A splendid name, said the wolf. And where might you be heading, Little Red, if I might call you that? Well, you may, said Little Red Riding Hood. I'm bringing my grandmother this basket of treats. She lives just on the other side of the forest. Wow, I don't know if I'd stop and talk to that guy. He's got really big teeth. How kind of you, said the wolf. In fact, wouldn't your grandmother like a lovely bouquet of wildflowers as well? There are some lovely ones over the hill, there by the edge of the valley. Little Red Riding Hood remembered what her mother had said. Do you remember? I'll read it. From the path you shouldn't stray, or you could get lost someday. Well, I'm glad she was thinking about it. Do you think she listened to her mother? Thought Little Red Riding Hood. Mother surely would want me to bring grandmother some flowers. That's a wonderful idea, Mr. Wolf, she said. I'll pick some right away. And she scampered off into the woods. Goodbye, Little Red, said the wolf, calling after her. I'm sure we'll meet again very soon. And then he whispered, by which I mean for lunch. Well, the moment Red Riding Hood disappeared, the wolf dashed down the path towards the grandmother's house, to her cottage, and he tapped lightly on her door. Grandmother, he said in his, that was the next character. Grandmother, he said in his best little girl voice, it's me, Little Red Riding Hood. He's trying to trick the grandma. Little Red, really? How wonderful, said Grandma. Grandmother flung open the door. Wait, she said, you're not Little Red Riding Hood? Sadly, no, said the wolf, by which I mean goodbye, and he swallowed that grandma up in one big gulp. Is this a true story? No, it's a fairy tale. That's how you know. That one could never happen. And now, said the wolf, patting his stomach, I'll wait for my dessert. Sometime later, Red Riding Hood came out of the woods. She was dirty and rumpled, and there were burrs in her hair because she'd been looking for flowers for her grandmother. It was much harder to find those flowers and then find the path again. So glad I didn't get lost, she said. Well, she was surprised, though, because her grandmother's door was wide open, and she stepped inside. Grandmother, are you home? She asked. Yes, dear, came a scratchy voice from the bedroom. But I'm in bed. I'm afraid I have a nasty cold, said her grandmother. Now, is that really the grandmother? No, it's the wolf. Oh my goodness, what's going to happen? Red Riding Hood followed the voice into the bedroom, and the curtains were closed and was very dark and hard to see, and Grandmother was wearing a floppy nightcap, and the blankets were pulled up to her nose. Red Riding Hood moved toward the bed, and Grandmother's eyes looked very odd. Why, Grandmother, she said, what big eyes you have. All the better to see you with, my dear. Come give me a hug. Red Riding Hood took another step and saw two odd triangles poking up under the nightcap. Grandmother, what big ears you have. All the better to hear you with, my dear, but can you come a little closer? Just then, the blanket slipped from Grandmother's face and revealing two rows of very sharp teeth. But Grandmother, said Red Riding Hood, what big teeth you have. And the wolf jumped out and said, the better to eat you with, and he leaped out of Grandmother's bed. Red Riding Hood screamed, ah, and she ran out of the bedroom and through the main room and into the kitchen, and she slammed the door behind her. She clambered into a cabinet and she shut the door. Oh, why didn't I listen to my mother, she thought. If I hadn't stopped in the woods, I wouldn't have met the wolf. And if I hadn't met the wolf, then I wouldn't have left the path. And if I hadn't left the path, I wouldn't have been late to Grandmother's house. Then none of this would have happened. She looks a little frightened. In the kitchen, she could hear the wolf calling to her. Where are you, little Red Riding Hood? He said. There's no need to hide, by which I mean I'm going to find you and eat you no matter what. Well, just then something crashed. A voice yelled. Dishes smashed. The sounds got louder and louder and wilder. And Little Red Riding Hood peeked out from behind the cabinet, and there stood her brother with his axe in one hand, and he was helping Grandmother step out of the wolf. Thank you, dear, said Grandmother. It was very dark in there. Well, the brother looked at Little Red Riding Hood. I knew you wouldn't listen, he said. Little Red Riding Hood scrambled out of the cabinet, and she gave her brother a big hug. You were right, but from now on I will. Thank goodness he was there. He must have been taking care of her. Then Little Red Riding Hood and her brother and her grandmother all sat down to eat the treats from the basket. The end. Did you like that story? Were you a little bit afraid or worried? Remember, it's just a story. It's just a fairy tale. I wonder if you'd like to play a really quick game. Remember, we played it when we were together. It's called I'm Thinking of, and then you give some clues. Would you like to play I'm Thinking of with the things in the basket? Let's try it. I'm thinking of something that grows on a tree, and it is red, and you eat it. Need another clue? And it makes the sound ah, ah, ah. Apple says ah, ah, ah. I'm thinking of something that grows on a tree. It is yellow, and you eat it. That can be a lot of things, huh? Let's think. Oh, I know how to give you a clue. It begins with the sound b, b, b. Banana says b, b, b. Here's the last one. It's yellow and it grows on a tree, and you can eat it. You think it's another banana? No. This is also something that's sour and makes you make a face when you try it. Is that a clue? It begins with the sound l. L. It grows on a tree. It's yellow, and it starts with the l sound. Lemon. Those are the three things that were in the basket for a treat for Grandma. Well, thank you for coming, and I hope that you were inspired to put on some dress-ups and add some props to your storytelling at home.